The wind carried whispers across the plains of West Texas, 1867. Whispers of death, of violence, of a hatred that burned hotter than the merciless sun overhead. Some stories are buried with those who lived them. Others refuse to stay silent, cutting through time like the howl of a wolf beneath the moon. This is one such story. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Phantom Creek, Texas, a forgotten stain on the map where the promise of silver had drawn desperate men and their families. The kind of place where hope went to die, where dreams dried up like raindrops on scorched earth, and where mercy was as rare as shade at high noon. It was Wednesday morning when the soldiers from Fort Griffin arrived, their blue coats stiff with dust, their eyes hard as flint. The people of Phantom Creek weren't soldiers or rebels, just miners, storekeepers and farmers who'd made the mistake of settling too close to contested territory. Amelia Blackwood watched from the shadow of a cottonwood as Captain Monroe dismounted. His brass buttons gleamed in the harsh light as he unfolded his orders. Her father stood among the town elders, his shoulders squared despite the fear she knew churned in his gut. The meeting lasted less than 10 minutes. When it ended, her father's face had gone the color of ash. "Pack only what you can carry," he told her that evening, his voice hollow as he stuffed food into a canvas sack. "The Army's moving everyone out at first light, says the Comanche raids are getting worse, says they can't protect us here anymore." Amelia nodded, though she knew better. The Comanche hadn't bothered with Phantom Creek in months. This was about the silver mines and who controlled them. This was about power dressed up as protection. But at 16, with skin the warm brown of her Cherokee mother and the green eyes of her white father, Amelia had learned early that some truths were best left unspoken. Dawn hadn't yet broken when the screams began. Amelia bolted upright on her pallet, heart hammering against her ribs. Her father grabbed his shotgun, pushing her toward the root cellar. "Stay there," he commanded, his voice steady despite the panic in his eyes. "No matter what you hear." She didn't obey, not when the front door splintered, not when her father's shotgun roared once, twice, not when she heard his body hit the floor with a terrible finality. She slipped out the back window instead, bare, feet silent in the dirt as she darted between buildings. Phantom Creek was burning, not from Comanche arrows, but from torches held by men in Union blue. Soldiers herded terrified townsfolk into the square like cattle. Some tried to run. They were cut down without hesitation. Through the chaos, Amelia spotted Captain Monroe watching from horseback, his face impassive as a stone idol. She should have run then, should have disappeared into the surrounding hills. But something held her rooted to the spot. Horror, disbelief, a desperate hope that she was caught in some terrible dream. By the time she realized her mistake, rough hands had seized her arms. "Got another one, Captain," a sergeant called, dragging Amelia into the square. She didn't fight, didn't scream. The stillness that had served her mother's people for generations settled over her like a shroud. The captain barely glanced at her, put her with the others. Amelia was shoved into a group of weeping women and silent, wide-eyed children. A woman she recognized as the blacksmith's wife grabbed her hand, squeezing so hard the bones seemed to grind together. Neither spoke. Words had become useless things. That's when Amelia noticed the men were missing, all except old Mr. Whitaker, who was too frail to work the mines. A cold realization dawned as she looked across the square to where a line of bodies lay face down in the dust. She recognized her father's faded blue shirt, now stained dark with blood. "This land is now under military jurisdiction," Captain Monroe announced, his voice carrying across the square without emotion. "Anyone remaining after sunset will be considered hostile." A woman cried out, "Where are we supposed to go?" The captain's smile never reached his eyes. "That's not my concern." They were marched out of town at gunpoint, allowed to take only what they could carry. No wagons, no horses, just the clothes on their backs and whatever they could hold in. Their arms, 23 women, 14 children, 1 old man, the dead they were forced to leave behind. Amelia walked in silence, her mother's medicine pouch tucked beneath her dress, her father's pocket watch clutched in her fist. The blacksmith's wife, Martha, stayed close, her 7-year-old daughter, Emma, clinging to her skirts. As they trudged across the scrubland, Amelia heard the soldiers behind them laughing. One fired his pistol into the air, making the children scream. They had walked perhaps 5 miles when the shots rang out. Not warning shots this time. Amelia turned to see Martha collapse, a crimson bloom spreading across her back. All around her, women and children were falling. The soldiers had formed a firing line. "Run!" someone screamed. Amelia grabbed Emma's hand and bolted toward a ravine to their right. Bullets kicked up dust at their heels. Emma stumbled, crying. Out as her knee hit a rock, Amelia scooped her up without breaking stride. The child's weight nothing compared to the barrels of water she'd hauled daily from the creek. They weren't the only ones running. Others scattered in all directions, desperate to escape the methodical gunfire. Amelia heard hoofbeats behind them, riders pursuing the fleeing survivors. She veered sharply into a stand of mesquite, thorns, tearing at her dress, at Emma's arms. The child whimpered but didn't cry. When they reached the ravine, Amelia slid down its steep bank, holding Emma tight against her chest. The dry creek bed offered some cover, and she followed it westward, away from the shooting that was now growing more sporadic. The sounds of pursuit faded, but she didn't slow down. Couldn't risk it. By midday, the sun was merciless. Emma's lips were cracked from thirst, her eyes glazed. Amelia's own throat felt lined with sand. They needed water, shelter, but the landscape offered little of either, just endless stretches of rock and scrub shimmering under the Texas heat. When Emma began to stumble every few steps, Amelia knew they had to stop. A cluster of boulders offered meager shade. As they huddled in the shadow, Amelia took stock of what she had. Her mother's medicine pouch, her father's watch, a small knife tucked into her boot, and nothing else. No water, no food, no chance, unless they found help. Are the soldiers coming? Back? Emma whispered, her voice cracking. Amelia stroked the child's hair, matted with sweat and dirt. No, they won't find us here. It wasn't a lie, exactly. The soldiers probably wouldn't waste time tracking 2 fleeing girls when they had a town to plunder. But without water, it hardly mattered. The desert would finish what the bullets had started. As evening approached, bringing marginal relief from the heat, Amelia made a decision. They couldn't stay where they were. Heading west, toward the mountains, offered their best chance. There might be springs, caves, perhaps even a trading post or ranch. It was a slim hope, but hope nonetheless. They walked through the night, guided by stars and the pale light of a quarter moon. Emma didn't complain, though Amelia knew every step must hurt. The child had a stoicism beyond her years, a quality that might keep her alive if anything could. Dawn revealed a landscape no more forgiving than the one they'd left behind. But as the sun climbed higher, Amelia spotted something in the distance, a dark line of vegetation that suggested water. New energy surged through her tired limbs. Where there was water, there might be food, shelter. The creek was little more than a trickle between moss-covered stones, but its water was clear and cool. They drank carefully, as Amelia's mother had taught her, letting their bodies adjust to the moisture. After filling an empty turtle shell she found nearby, Amelia helped Emma wash the dirt from her face and hands. "What now?" Emma asked, looking stronger already. Amelia scanned the rocky slopes rising on either side of the creek. "We follow the water, see where it leads us." They spent that day walking upstream, stopping occasionally to rest in patches of shade. Amelia showed Emma which plants were safe to eat. Prickly pear pads, once the spines were burned off with Amelia's flint. Mesquite beans, the tender hearts of yucca. It wasn't much, but it kept the worst hunger at bay. As the sun began to set, turning the western sky to fire, they came upon a series of low cliffs where the creek emerged from an underground spring. And there, half hidden by brush and shadow, was the mouth of a small cave. Amelia approached cautiously, knife in hand. The opening was narrow, barely wide enough for her shoulders, but it widened inside into a space about the size of the storeroom. Back home, the floor was sandy and dry, the walls cool to the touch. Best of all, it offered protection from both the elements and any searching eyes. "We'll stay here tonight," she told Emma, who had already curled up in the deepest corner, exhaustion finally claiming her. Amelia sat at the cave's entrance, watching darkness swallow the land. She thought of her father, of the town she'd known her whole life, of the senseless violence that had destroyed it all in the space of a morning. Grief rose in her throat like bile, but she swallowed it down. Later, there would be time for mourning. Now, survival demanded everything she had. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Days blended into one another. Amelia established a routine: gather food and water at dawn and dusk, stay hidden during the hottest hours, keep watch while Emma slept. She used her knife to fashion crude snares, occasionally catching a rabbit or quail to supplement their meager diet. With stones and mud, she built a small dam in the creek, creating a deeper pool where minnows gathered. These she caught with her hands, a skill her mother had taught her. Emma rarely spoke of the massacre, but sometimes Amelia would wake to find her silently weeping. On those nights, she'd hold the child close, humming songs her mother had sung to her. Cherokee lullabies that seemed to calm Emma's spirit even if she didn't understand the words. Weeks passed. Amelia notched a small stick each day, keeping track. 26 marks, nearly a month since Phantom Creek. Their bodies adapted to the harsh conditions. Amelia's skin darkened under the sun. Her hands grew calloused from work. Emma's childish softness gave way to wiry strength. They survived, but survival wasn't living. Then came the storm. It built throughout the afternoon, dark clouds piling up over the western mountains like a fortress. The air grew still, heavy, with the promise of rain. Amelia hurried to gather extra food, to reinforce the brush screen she'd built across the cave entrance. The first drops fell just as twilight descended, fat, warm splashes that kicked up dust where they landed. Then the sky cracked open. Rain fell in blinding sheets, turning the trickling creek into a churning torrent within minutes. Thunder shook the ground. Lightning transformed night into harsh, white day. Inside the cave, Amelia and Emma huddled together, watching water sluice past their shelter. The storm's fury was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. It spoke of a power beyond human malice or kindness, nature's indifferent rage. "It's like the sky is crying," Emma whispered, her eyes wide. Amelia nodded, thinking of all the tears she'd held back. Sometimes, even the sky needs to let go. The downpour continued through the night. By morning, their small creek had become a swollen river that carved new channels through the landscape. The cave remained dry, but their brush screen had washed away, leaving the entrance exposed to any passing eyes. As Amelia worked to rebuild their camouflage, movement on the opposite bank caught her eye. She froze, knife clutched in her fist. A deer, perhaps, or a coyote come to investigate the changed terrain. But what emerged from the brush was neither animal nor soldier. It was a man, tall and lean, with copper skin and hair that hung in two long braids adorned with hawk feathers. He wore buckskin leggings and a calico shirt that had seen better days. At his heels padded three animals that Amelia first mistook for wolves, enormous dogs with pricked ears and watchful eyes. The man stood perfectly still, surveying the flood-ravaged creek bed. One of the dogs whined softly and he murmured something in response. Then with deliberate slowness, he turned his head and looked directly at the cave entrance. At Amelia. She should have ducked back inside, should have grabbed Emma and retreated to the furthest corner, but something in the man's steady gaze held her motionless. Not fear. She'd seen enough cruelty to recognize its absence. What she saw instead was a quiet assessment, neither hostile nor particularly friendly. For a long moment they regarded each other across the rushing water. Then the man raised his hand, palm outward, in what might have been a greeting or a promise not to harm. Before Amelia could decide how to respond, he turned and disappeared back into the brush, his dogs following like shadows. "Who was that?" Emma asked from the cave entrance, her voice small. Amelia sheathed her knife with hands that trembled slightly. "I don't know. He looked like an Indian." "Yes." Amelia's thoughts raced. The man's dress and appearance suggested Comanche, the very people the soldiers had claimed were threatening Phantom Creek. The irony wasn't lost on her. Will he come back? There was fear in Emma's question, but curiosity too. Amelia stared at the spot where the man had vanished. "I think so." She spent the rest of the day in a state of hypervigilance, jumping at every sound, scanning the opposite bank for any sign of the stranger. But he didn't return, and eventually exhaustion forced her to rest. She slept fitfully, waking at the slightest noise, the knife never leaving her hand. Dawn broke clear and cool, the storm's violence nothing but a memory. As Amelia ventured out to check her snares, she found something that hadn't been there the previous evening, a small bundle wrapped in rawhide, placed on a flat rock near the cave entrance. Inside was a handful of dried meat, a flint and steel far superior to her crude fire-starting tools, and a small clay pot filled with a sticky substance that smelled of herbs and bear fat, a salve for the cuts and scrapes that covered their arms and legs. Emma approached cautiously, eyeing the bundle. "Is it from him?" Amelia nodded, running her fingers over the finely crafted flint striker. "Yes." "Why would he help us?" It was a good question, one Amelia had been asking herself. Since spotting the package, the Comanche had a fearsome reputation among white settlers. Stories of brutal raids, of torture and kidnapping circulated through every town and outpost, but her mother had taught her to look beyond stories told by fearful tongues. "Not everyone is what others claim they are," she said finally, tucking the gifts into her medicine pouch. "Remember how Captain Monroe said he was protecting us?" Emma's face darkened at the memory. "He lied." "Yes, so maybe others lie too, about people they fear or don't understand." They spent the day as usual, gathering food, repairing their shelter, conserving energy during the hottest hours. But now there was a new awareness, a sense of being watched that wasn't entirely unpleasant. Twice, Amelia thought she glimpsed movement among the distant rocks, but when she looked directly, there was nothing. Night fell. The first stars appeared, pinpricks of silver in a deepening blue. Amelia built a small fire just inside the cave. Entrance using the new flint to strike sparks that caught eagerly in a nest of dry grass. The flames cast dancing shadows on the rock walls as she prepared a meager stew of rabbit and wild onions. The sound was so soft she almost missed it. A deliberate scuff of foot against stone. Amelia's hand flew to her knife as she whirled toward the cave entrance. He stood there, a silhouette against the night sky, not inside their shelter, but at a respectful distance. Behind him, the three dogs sat on their haunches, alert but calm. "Thank you," Amelia said, gesturing to the fire, to the medicine pouch where his gifts were stored. "Aho." The man's expression didn't change, but something in his posture relaxed slightly. He spoke, his voice deep and roughened by wind and distance. The words were unfamiliar to Amelia. Comanche, she guessed, or perhaps Kiowa. When she didn't respond, he switched to heavily accented English. "You are far from your people." It wasn't a question, but Amelia answered anyway. "They're gone. Soldiers came." Her throat tightened around the words. "They killed everyone." The man nodded, once as if this confirmed something he already knew or suspected. His gaze shifted to Emma, who had pressed herself against the cave wall, eyes wide with apprehension. "The child is not yours." Again, not a question. "Her mother was killed too. I couldn't leave her." A long silence followed. The fire crackled. One of the dogs whined softly and was hushed by a subtle hand gesture. "I am called Tabe," the man said finally. "It means son." Amelia lowered her knife, though she didn't put it away entirely. "I'm Amelia. This is Emma." Another silence, less tense than the first. Tabe made no move to enter the cave, and Amelia didn't invite him. Trust was a luxury neither could afford. "You cannot stay here," he said at last. "Bluecoats patrol these hills. They would not be kind to find you alive." A chill ran through Amelia despite the fire's warmth. Of course, the soldiers wouldn't want witnesses. Anyone who escaped would be hunted. "Where can we go?" she asked. "There's nothing for miles." Tabe's expression remained unreadable in the firelight. "My people camp 3 days' ride west, beyond the soldiers' usual hunting grounds." Amelia's breath caught. Was he offering safe passage, sanctuary, or something else entirely? Stories of white women and children taken captive by Comanche raiders flashed through her mind, tales whispered among the women of Phantom Creek. But what choice did they have? Stay and eventually be found by soldiers, or trust this strange, solemn man and his wolf dogs? "Why would you help us?" she asked, echoing Emma's earlier question. Tabe was silent for so long that Amelia thought he might not answer. When he did, his words were soft but carried the weight of stone. "I know the sound of grief. It does not speak in one tongue alone." With that, he turned and vanished into the darkness, the dogs following like smoke. But Amelia knew he hadn't gone far. He was watching, waiting for her decision. Emma crept to her side, small fingers clutching at her skirt. "Are we going with him?" Amelia stared into the night, weighing fear against hope, suspicion against need. She thought of her mother, who had crossed boundaries of race and culture to marry her father, who had taught her that courage often meant trusting when all evidence suggested caution. "Yes," she said finally, "we leave at first light." As if in response, one of the dogs howled in the distance, a sound both mournful and triumphant that echoed across the rocky landscape. It spoke of wilderness and freedom, of paths untraveled and stories yet to be told. Amelia added another stick to the fire and began to pack their few possessions. The journey ahead would not be easy, but then nothing in this harsh land ever was. All they could do was move forward, carrying their ghosts with them, hoping for something better beyond the next horizon. Under the vast Texas sky, beneath stars that had witnessed countless human dramas unfold, 3 unlikely companions prepared to write a new chapter in a story as old as the land itself. A story of survival, of unexpected alliances, of finding humanity in the aftermath of its absence. Dawn arrived with a whisper of gold across the eastern sky. Amelia and Emma stood at the cave entrance, their few possessions gathered. Taabe waited with his 3 dogs, motionless as the surrounding rocks. Without a word, he turned westward and began walking. The journey had begun. The first day tested their endurance. Taabe set a relentless pace across terrain that seemed designed to break the human spirit. Jagged ravines, steep inclines, vast stretches of sun-baked earth where nothing grew but thorns. Emma stumbled often, but never complained. By midday, Taabe lifted her onto his shoulders without breaking stride. Amelia watched, surprised by this unexpected gentleness. They stopped only when darkness made travel impossible. At their campsite, a sheltered hollow between wind-sculpted boulders, Taabe built a fire so small its light barely illuminated their faces. The wolf dogs formed a protective circle around them, alert to sounds Amelia couldn't hear. "You said 3 days' ride," she said, as he handed her strips of dried venison. "But we're walking." "Horses would draw attention," Taabe replied, his voice low. "Scouts watch these territories." "Army scouts?" His expression hardened. "And Kiowa? Not—" "All tribes walk the same path." That night, as Emma slept curled against her side, Amelia studied their guide through half-closed eyes. Taabe sat motionless, face turned toward the distant mountains. The firelight carved deep shadows beneath his cheekbones, highlighting scars she hadn't noticed before, one along his jaw, another bisecting his left eyebrow. Wounds from battle, perhaps, or something else entirely. "You should sleep," he said without turning. "Tomorrow will be harder." He was right. The second day brought them through a maze of canyons where the heat built like a living thing, pressing against their skin, stealing the moisture from their bodies. Taabe shared his water skin sparingly, always ensuring Emma drank first. By late afternoon, mirages shimmered across the horizon, phantom lakes that vanished as they approached. That evening, Taabe vanished into the gathering dusk. When he returned, an hour later, he carried a jackrabbit. As he prepared it, Amelia noticed a medallion hanging from a leather cord around his neck. A small silver disc marked with unfamiliar symbols. "What is that?" she asked, nodding toward it. Taabe's hand moved to cover it. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "A token from someone who once showed me kindness." Before she could ask more, one of the dogs growled, a low, warning sound that raised the hair on Amelia's arms. Taabe extinguished the fire with a handful of sand, then pressed his finger to his lips. "Listen." At first, Amelia heard nothing. Then faint but unmistakable hoofbeats in the distance, many horses moving at a steady pace. "Soldiers," she whispered. Taabe shook his head. "Comancheros, traders who deal in weapons, and people." Fear clutched at Amelia's throat. "Will they find us?" "Not if we stay silent." His hand moved to his knife. "But if they do, you run. Take the child and go north. The dogs will follow." The riders passed half a mile to their south, their voices carrying on the night air, crude laughter, snatches of Spanish and English. When the sounds faded, Taabe relaxed slightly. "Sleep now," he said. "No fire tonight." The third day broke, with unexpected beauty. Sunrise painting the cliffs in shades of amber and rose. They walked in silence, conserving energy. By mid-morning, Taabe pointed to a distant smudge on the horizon that might have been smoke. "My people," he said. Amelia's step faltered. "Will they accept us?" Taabe's gaze was steady. "They have seen what the bluecoats do to those who cross them. They will understand." They reached the camp as dusk was falling. A cluster of teepees stood in a sheltered valley beside a spring-fed creek. Children stopped their play to stare. Women paused in their work, expressions guarded. Men approached, with hands near weapons. Taabe spoke rapidly in Comanche. Amelia caught the cadence but not the meaning. She held Emma's hand tightly, aware of every eye upon them. Then an elderly woman stepped forward, her face a map of wrinkles, her eyes sharp as obsidian. She studied Amelia for a long moment before turning to Taabe. "Numunu?" she asked. "Ta," he replied. "Yes." The woman nodded once, then reached out. Her weathered hands toward Emma. The child shrank back against Amelia's side. "It's all right," Taabe said softly. "She offers welcome." Emma hesitated, then stepped forward. The old woman touched her head gently, murmuring words that sounded like a blessing. Then she turned back toward the camp, gesturing for them to follow. That night, fed and clean for the first time in weeks, Amelia sat outside the teepee they'd been given, Stars crowded the sky, brilliant and close. Taibei appeared beside her, silent as always. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For seeing us as people, not as enemies." His expression softened slightly. "I know what it means to lose everything, to be hunted for merely existing." He fingered the medallion at his throat. "Years ago, a white woman sheltered me when I was wounded. Her husband was a doctor. They could have turned me in for the bounty. Instead, they healed me, gave me this." He held up the silver disc. By starlight, Amelia could make out the engraving, a winged figure holding what appeared to be a staff with snakes. "A caduceus," she said, "symbol of healing." Tabe nodded. "She said it would protect me. Perhaps it did. Perhaps it led me to find you and the child." He paused. "The old woman, my grandmother, says you both have strong spirits. You will find a place here." A place. The word echoed in Amelia's heart. After so much loss, could they truly belong somewhere again? Across the camp, Emma laughed as she played with Comanche children who had overcome their initial shyness. The sound was like water in the desert, unexpected, precious. "And you?" Amelia asked. "What is your place?" Tabe's gaze moved across. "The valley to the distant mountains, dark against the star-filled sky. I walk between worlds, not fully in either." His eyes, when they met hers, held something unspoken, but perhaps that is where I am meant to be. In that moment, under the vast Texas sky, Amelia felt a shift within herself. Not healing, not yet, but the possibility of it. Like the first. Green shoot after fire has swept the prairie, the promise of renewal after devastation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.